What is the real difference between your regular Converse All-Star high tops and the Converse Chuck 70s? That's what we're going to try to figure out by cutting these in half, run through our test to really try to figure out which one of these could technically be called a slipper. Is the Chuck 70 actually better? Where does the name Chuck 70 come from? Which is more comfortable out of the two? And is the Chuck 70 worth $30 more? And if you don't know, Converse has a pretty cool and long history. It all started in 1917 for at least the All-Stars, when the Converse All-Star basketball shoe was introduced and became extremely popular during World War I. But in 1922, a basketball player named Charles Chuck Taylor went to Converse complaining about his sore feet, and Converse hired him as a brand ambassador, and hence the name Chucks. Then over the next few decades, Converse became the shoe of choice for basketball. Within 1936, members of the U.S. national basketball team won the Olympics, taking gold, beating Canada 19-8, which is very low. Then in 1949, the BAA and the National League merged together to form the NBA, and nearly every single player was playing in Converse. In 1962, when Wilt Chamberlain scored his infamous 100-point game in a pair of Converse. And then by the 1970s, Chucks had peaked in their performance, their popularity, and really pushed this technology as far as it was able to go. But there were some new kids on the block with new technology that was slowly starting to take chunks out of their stranglehold on the industry, with Nike, Puma, Reebok surpassing the technology of rubber and canvas. Then from the 1970 onward, they just kind of slowly became less popular. They weren't really athletic shoes anymore. They just became slowly more casual shoes. And as Converse fell out of the performance limelight, the quality slowly dropped to match the fact that they weren't performance shoes anymore. But 40 years later, in 2013, Converse launched the Chuck Taylor All-Star 70, which was built really similar to the Converse at the peak of their performance in the 70s, hence the name Chuck 70s. So what are the shoes that we're comparing? Well, we got the Converse Chuck Taylor All-Star Canvas, and we're just going to call them the All-Stars for the duration of this video. They weigh 11.4 ounces. They retail for $65, and they're made in Indonesia. And the way they position the All-Stars is edgy this week, sporty the next. 10 years from now, TBD. No matter how or when your style changes, you can always come back to the classic, the original Chuck Taylor All-Star, an icon for every era. Which is very true. I don't know if these have ever gone out of style. I've always owned at least one or two pairs of Chucks for my entire life. The competitor is the Converse Chuck 70 Canvas. They weigh 1 pound even. They retail for $90. They're made in Vietnam. And the way they position this is the Chuck 70 offers a blank canvas for you to tell your own stories through style or activity. Plus they nod to where it all began with their tried and true design, while modern comfort updates bring your look into the present. By 1970, the Chucks had evolved to become the pinnacle of function and utility for sport, and was considered the best basketball sneaker ever. The Chuck 70 is built off the original 1970 design with premium materials and extraordinary attention to detail. A shoe so rooted in tradition, it has its own instant history. That's the Chuck 70. It's the shoe. And if you want either of these, check them out via link to my description. On occasion, if you use those links, it helps out the channel and helps us out. So, like I mentioned, we're going to call these the All-Stars and the Chuck 70s, and we're going to go through all the details. So let's start with the upper first. It has that classic canvas upper that Converse are known for. It's 0.66 millimeters thick and is a pretty flexible fabric that you shouldn't have to really break in much at all. Compare that to the 70s, this is a lot more thick and more durable canvas. It's 1 millimeter thick, so that's where you get some more of that rigidity. It's going to take a little bit longer to break in, but you should get some more durability and longevity out of this canvas compared to the All-Star canvas. And to see if that's true, we did the puncture test on these. The All-Stars took 38.5 pounds to puncture through, while the Chuck 70s took 49 pounds. So is the Chuck 70 actually better and more performance inspired? Well, it's got thicker and more durable canvas for more support and durability, so yes to me. But what about the insides? Because this is something that Converse has at least changed with this version of the All-Stars. I'm not sure if it's all the way through even like the classic black pairs, but on this white pair, you've got a kind of a typical sneaker liner. And a lot of times this more sneaker type lining is not as durable as a heavy canvas, because if you compare that to the Chuck 70s, this has another canvas on the inside. It's about as thick as the outer canvas of the regular All-Stars. I lean towards thinking it's going to be more durable, but more importantly, the spot that these shoes wear out the most, on the inside at least, right at that heel where you get a little heel slip and start wearing through that lining. With the Chuck 70s, you have a full dedicated internal counter cover that is another layer of canvas, which is backed by the actual counter, and it has a binding all the way around it. So there's just more and thicker material to wear through, and it structures that heel a little bit more than the regular Chucks. So are the Chuck 70s actually better and more performance inspired? They clearly are. And one thing I didn't notice until right before recording this is this little stitch line here. I just thought it was kind of a classic looking stitch line from the OGs, like from the 70s, but it actually is a functional stitch, because on the inside, the lining wraps a little bit further from the vamp, adding an extra layer, and that stitch line sews that that upper to that vamp layer, giving you a little bit more material to wear through it, a little bit more structure, and that stitch is actually functional, which I really like. So clearly the Chuck 70s are better and more performance inspired. What about the insoles? Well, they're basically the same insole. The Chuck 70s are just removable where the All-Stars are not. And they're built the same way with the lining material on top, some open cell foam underneath, and then this wedge of this black material. The difference between the two, besides the All-Stars not being removable, I'm just gonna remove it. You can still remove it, it's just glued down more and it's tacked down more. But the difference being that black wedge on the All-Stars is a foam versus the Chuck 70s is a blown rubber. So the All-Stars are a little bit softer at 25 Shore A, whereas the Chuck 70s are 50 Shore A. So the All-Stars are gonna be a little bit softer and squishier underfoot, which might lead you to think they're gonna be more comfortable. But once we have those out, you can see the All-Stars just have your typical lasting material, Strobel stitched to the upper, whereas the Chuck 70s have a 5mm foam layer that is kind of a memory foam consistency, and that adds a lot of extra squish and comfort, outweighing the extra squish you get from the foam in the wedge from the All-Stars, making the Chuck 70s more performance inspired and more comfortable. What about the outsole? This is my favorite part about Converse, is they're so freaking sneaky and tricky with this, because they both have rubber outsoles, but you'll notice the All-Stars have a little bit of fuzziness on the bottom here. And the reason they do that is really sneaky and tricky, because if you have felt on the bottom of the shoe, you can technically consider it slippers, and that has an import tariff of 3%, whereas a sneaker without felt, is considered a sneaker, has an import fee of 37%. Which is 12 1/3 times more expensive to import than just slippers. So that's why on all your Converse, they always have that weird felted material. It's a little workaround that they're doing to make these cheaper or increase their margins, either way. But they're pretty cheap, they're only 60 bucks. But as for the actual quality of the outsoles, it seems like they're about the same. You know, that felt is gonna be a little bit more slippery compared to rubber, but the drummers are both 70 Shore A. And it looks like they're basically the exact same pattern, around the same depth. The Chuck 70 does have a little bit deeper grooves and reliefs in the outsole, and so it might be a little bit thicker, but we'll see when we get it cut in half. But we wanted to run the bar drop test on it to see how those different internal layers affected the rebound. The All-Stars bounced up 11.4 inches, the Chuck 70s bounced up 13.4 inches. So I'm assuming that comes from those extra layers, the more rigid wedge, and that bit of 5mm foam through the midsole. But an interesting result was we did the puncture test, and the All-Stars took 75 pounds of puncture through. The Chuck 70s took 59 pounds. So there might be some differences on the inside of the All-Stars that you don't see in the Chuck 70s. So are the Chuck 70s more performance inspired and more comfortable? It's not really enough to say they are, but I think the felt is less grippy than just straight rubber. And then finally to the construction, both of them are vulcanized, and if you don't know what vulcanizing construction is, it's really interesting because they use thin strips of rubber they call foxing, and before that rubber's fully cured, they attach the outsole to the upper by basically using that tape to tape it together. Then they're put in big ovens, and then that rubber is fully cured, binding it and bonding it to the upper material and the outsole, which has its pros and cons. It's easier to break in, you have more ground feel, and it's a more affordable way to make sneakers. The cons are it's not as durable, it's not as squishy, and they just wear out faster. Everyone that has a pair of Chucks, actually I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. If you look at Josh's pair of Chucks, you can see here that foxing did not hold up and he's completely blown out the side of the shoe, which wouldn't happen with the cup sole or literally any other kind of construction. That's why Vans and Chucks always do this, because they're vulcanized. So is there a difference between the two? Well, there actually is, because the Chuck 70s have a reinforced fiber structure in the actual foxing itself, so it's gonna be more durable, it's gonna be stronger, it's not gonna wear as fast, and it has taller sidewalls, giving you more adhesion to the actual material. It might not delaminate as much, and it could be more durable. So to me, the Chuck 70s are better and more performance inspired, but that's just the outside. So let's cut them in half, see what's on the inside, and see if we can figure out why this had better puncture test and answer all those questions. we got them both cut in half. If you're not subscribed, consider doing it. It's just a little click, and it's what allows us to afford to cut apart 2 brand new pairs of shoes in every single week. I'm gonna show you to everybody. Look at this little guy. Look at this guy. This is Taco, Toaster's cousin. And he's cute and really annoying. So now shut up so I can record. Look at this. Anyway, so let's see what's inside. So are there any real differences between them that we didn't notice that might have given the All-Stars a better puncture test? Not really. There's really nothing else that we missed. The outsole of the Chuck 70s is a little bit thicker, but for the most part, they're identical. So then which of these is more comfortable? Well, clearly the Chuck 70 is, to me at least. Comfort's very subjective, but with all the different layers and the extra foam in the middle, it's just more comfortable to me. But is it actually better? I think it is. I think basically every component is better than the All-Stars through and through. So is it worth that extra $30? Well, for me, it is. Going from $60 to $90 is still a 50% increase in the price. But for me, the extra longevity, the materials, the extra comfort is worth $30. But that doesn't mean that I haven't bought tons and tons of just regular Chucks, because they are $60 and they do last a decent time. They're good looking and they're just hard to beat. You can pick up a pair basically anywhere. They're really affordable and they're just that classic iconic look. But the Chuck 70 is more durable, it's more comfortable. It harkens back to the peak of Converse when it was the shoe of choice in the 70s, when it had maxed out all the potential benefits and gains you could get from canvas and rubber and vulcanized construction. It's the peak of Converse, and it's really cool they're still making it today, or at least a version of it. And so maybe we'll try to find a pair of Converse from the 70s and see if it really is as close as they're saying, or if it's just more of like the marketing spin and trying to sell the exact same product with a different lens. Because I hope it's true to the original. So if you guys want to see that, let me know. Because if this video does well, that's how we kind of decide what we're going to do. So support this video and let me know your experience in these, what you think of them. So thank you guys for watching this. Be sure to check these out. There'll be a link in my description. And thank you guys for everything you do. See ya. All right, let me do it again.